Under it stood Amelia Vaughn, CEO of Vaughn Automotive Group, framed by a row of shuttered service bays and a scattering of reporters who had been invited to watch her clean house. Behind her, an abandoned brick garage slouched against the afternoon sky, its roof sagging slightly, windows boarded, the sign half fallen from its bolts. "This," Amelia said, gesturing lightly toward the structure, "is what happens when businesses fail to evolve." A few employees laughed on cue. The garage had been part of an older acquisition, a small independent service shop absorbed during Vaughn's expansion spree and deemed inefficient after audits. Its lifts were outdated. Its ventilation archaic. The permits were expired. The land was zoned for redevelopment. "Demolition begins next week," Amelia continued. "Unless someone here feels nostalgic." More laughter. Ethan Cole stood near the back of the gathered staff, hands in his jacket pockets. He wasn't part of the executive circle anymore. He hadn't been for years. He'd once worked in systems optimization at Vaughn's corporate facility before stepping away quietly after his wife's death. Now he freelanced small restoration jobs and consulted occasionally when asked. He hadn't expected to be here today. Amelia's gaze swept the group and paused on him. "Ethan," she said, tone light but sharpened for effect. "Still tinkering with old engines?" A few heads turned. He nodded once. "Well," she continued, smiling for the cameras, "why don't you take this dump off our hands? $1,000 and it's yours." The crowd responded with the kind of laughter that carries no weight but plenty of volume. "Think of it as charity," one manager muttered. A reporter raised her microphone slightly. "Is this an official offer?" she asked. Amelia tilted her head. "Why not?" she said. $1,000. Clean transfer. No liabilities. He can do whatever he wants with it." The sarcasm was polished, almost elegant. Ethan didn't smile. He stepped away from the group and walked toward the garage without asking permission. The doors were chained but unlocked for inspection. He pushed one open slowly. Dust shifted in lazy spirals under the light. Inside, the space smelled of oil and neglect. 2 old lifts stood idle. A narrow inspection trench ran along the center. The concrete floor was cracked in places, but the foundation lines beneath were straight. He walked the perimeter quietly, fingertips brushing the edge of a service rail embedded in the floor. The ventilation ducts were outdated, yes, but intact. The electrical conduit had been upgraded once before Vaughn acquired it. The inspection trench aligned almost perfectly with a modular workflow layout he had once drafted years ago. Behind him, the laughter faded into murmurs. He stepped back into the sunlight. "I'll take it," he said. The employees looked confused. "You're serious?" Amelia asked. "Yes." "For $1,000? "Yes." She studied him briefly, perhaps expecting negotiation, pride, or irritation. There was none. "Done," she said, extending her hand for the cameras. They shook. The reporters snapped photos. Amelia turned back toward the group. "Well," she said lightly, "at least someone's getting a bargain." Ethan didn't respond. He looked once more at the building behind her. What Amelia Vaughn didn't realize, what none of the laughing managers understood, was that beneath the cracked concrete and outdated lifts, Ethan recognized something they had overlooked. The garage wasn't obsolete. It was unfinished. Section 2, the kitchen with the leaking ceiling. The kitchen ceiling dripped once, then stopped. It had been doing that since the spring rainstorm, and Ethan had patched it twice already. The bucket beneath the leak sat quietly beside the refrigerator, catching the occasional reminder that not everything fixed stays fixed. Claire sat at the small table with her knees tucked beneath her chin, a crayon pressed between her fingers. Her stuffed rabbit leaned against a chipped mug filled with milk. "Did we really buy that broken building?" she asked. Ethan set 2 plates down and nodded once. "Yes." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. He walked to the stove, stirred the pot slowly, then returned to the table. "Some things look ruined," he said, "because people stopped understanding them." Claire frowned. Like my math homework? Exactly. She seemed satisfied with that. The kitchen was modest, faded cabinets, uneven tiles, a single light fixture that hummed faintly. A blueprint hung on the wall near the pantry door, framed in cheap wood. It showed the layout of a service garage, curved intake lanes, inspection bays, and an alignment trench that mirrored the one in the building he'd just purchased. Claire glanced at it. That's the old garage? She asked. Yes. It's bendy. It needed to be. She slid off her chair and stood beneath the blueprint, tracing the curved lanes with her finger. Why didn't they keep it like that? Ethan paused. They wanted it faster. Is faster better? Not always. The leak in the ceiling tapped once more into the bucket. Claire looked up. You're going to fix that too? He smiled faintly. Yes. She returned to her chair and picked up another crayon. Is the building strong? She asked. Very. But it looks bad. So did this house, he said. She thought about that. Outside, the evening light faded across the small yard. The new garage keys rested on the counter beside the sink. After dinner, Ethan unfolded a folder he'd taken from the garage office earlier that day. Old inspection records, faded layout prints, and one document that made him pause. The original service trench design. The modular intake arcs he'd drafted years ago were still embedded beneath the concrete. They hadn't been ripped out during Vaughn's acquisition. They'd been covered, straightened, simplified, but not erased. He ran his finger across the page. They hadn't dismantled the structure. They'd misunderstood it. Claire tugged at his sleeve. Will it be loud when you fix it? No, he said. It'll just work. She nodded. The bucket caught another quiet drop from the ceiling. Ethan glanced upward, then back to the blueprint. The building wasn't broken. It was waiting. And he knew exactly where to start. Section 3, The Engineer Who Walked Away. 12 years earlier, Ethan Cole stood in a corporate conference room with a marker in his hand and grease still under his fingernails. He had never liked boardrooms. He preferred service floors. The company, Vaughn Automotive Group, had acquired a chain of mid-sized dealerships struggling with inventory delays and high reconditioning costs. Vehicles sat too long in intake. Cosmetic fixes preceded mechanical corrections. Warranty claims climbed quietly beneath quarterly reports. Ethan redesigned the entire reconditioning process. Not by adding staff. By restructuring flow. Instead of pushing vehicles through a straight intake line, inspection, cosmetic repair, mechanical review, final detailing, he created modular arcs. Each vehicle entered a curved diagnostic sequence that prioritized mechanical integrity first. Torque systems were recalibrated before cosmetic work began. Suspension alignment occurred before bodywork approval. Timing intervals were staggered so pressure accumulated nowhere. The floor began to move differently. Turnaround time dropped by nearly 40%. Waste declined. Repeat repairs shrank. Margins stabilized without price hikes. Executives applauded the numbers. Investors praised scalability. Victoria, then COO, called it lean modernization. Ethan didn't chase the credit. He stayed on the floor, refining inspection metrics and updating diagnostic modules. Then Claire fell ill. The diagnosis arrived fast. The prognosis faster. Ethan kept working because the system made sense when nothing else did. He returned home each night to hospital schedules and quiet rooms. When Claire died, the company offered him vice president of operations. The salary doubled. Authority increased. Public recognition followed. He declined. I need consistency, he said. They interpreted it as grief. He interpreted it as clarity. 6 months later, restructuring began. A new consulting firm was brought in to streamline operations further. The modular arcs were flagged. Overbuilt, one analyst said. Redundant checkpoints, another noted. Too slow for projected expansion targets. Ethan argued quietly. The arcs prevent downstream waste. The consultants smiled politely. Waste is acceptable at volume, they replied. The system was straightened. The curved intake lanes were replaced with linear throughput models. Mechanical verification became sampling instead of full inspection. Cosmetic presentation regained priority because it sold faster. On spreadsheets, output spiked. On the floor, small defects returned. Ethan documented the long-term cost projections. He filed them. They were acknowledged. Then archived. He resigned the following quarter. No announcement. No press release. His name disappeared from new process diagrams. The simplified system remained in place because it looked faster. He opened a small independent repair shop instead. But he didn't abandon the model. At night, after Claire's absence settled into routine silence and his daughter slept in the next room, Ethan redrafted the workflow geometry on legal pads. He recalibrated timing intervals by hand. He refined torque verification sequencing in ways the consultants never considered. He tested parts privately. He ran microdiagnostics in the shop long after customers left. He never stopped refining the system. When Vaughn Automotive shuttered the old garage, they assumed it held obsolete infrastructure. They didn't know the original geometry remained beneath the floor. They didn't know the man who designed it had quietly improved it for 12 years. Ethan never stopped refining the system. He just stopped doing it for them. Section 4, the first month. The first week was about foundations. Ethan unlocked the garage before sunrise each morning and worked alone until the light shifted through the cracked windows. The lifts groaned when powered up. He disassembled their hydraulics, replaced seals, recalibrated pressure valves, and aligned the platforms until they rose evenly without tilt. He pulled apart the old ventilation system next, clearing years of dust from ducts that once circulated balanced airflow across intake bays. He adjusted the intake fans to restore cross-current movement, air flowing along curved arcs rather than pooling in corners. The concrete floor took longer. Beneath a thin overlay of straight-line paint markings lay the original service channels he'd designed years ago. He chipped away at the surface layer carefully, revealing the curved diagnostic trench beneath. The arcs were still there, buried, but intact. He restored them. Outside, former Vaughn executives drove past occasionally, slowing just long enough to smirk at what they called his junkyard revival. Let him waste his $1,000. One manager reportedly joked at a sales meeting. Inside, Ethan wasn't chasing appearances. He rolled the first of the 12 vehicles onto the lift, a faded sedan with uneven suspension and inconsistent throttle response. The dealership intake tag listed it as unprofitable. He ignored the tag. He measured camber angles, corrected 2-degree misalignment in the rear left assembly, recalibrated the torque map to factory equilibrium, and flushed the transmission fluid that had been topped off but never replaced. He worked methodically. No rush. On day 9, the sedan idled smoothly. On day 10, he listed it quietly on a regional auto exchange site. No marketing campaign. No rebuttal to Vaughn's public insult. Within 48 hours it sold. Above dealership market value. The buyer drove from 2 counties away. This one feels different, the man said after the test drive. It's balanced, Ethan replied. The sale funded the next round of infrastructure repairs. Week 3 focused on suspension and intake recalibration for the second and third vehicles. He restored full torque verification checkpoints rather than sampling. He documented alignment metrics in a small notebook, refining timing intervals between diagnostic stages. Social media commentary still circulated about the 12-car joke, but the tone shifted slightly when buyers began posting independent reviews. Garage cars run cleaner. Less vibration under load. Dealership inventory in the region began moving slower. Ethan didn't comment. He repaired the 4th car. Replaced a misdiagnosed fuel sensor. Adjusted airflow sequencing. The garage no longer looked condemned. It looked intentional. By the end of the first month, 5 of the 12 vehicles were restored and sold. No banners. No announcements. Just steady output. and a number that didn't go unnoticed. The first restored vehicle had sold above dealership market value. Microhook. The first restored vehicle sells above dealership market value. Section 4. The first month. The first week was about foundations. Ethan unlocked the garage before sunrise each morning and worked alone until the light shifted through the cracked windows. The lifts groaned when powered up. He disassembled their hydraulics, replaced seals, recalibrated pressure valves, and aligned the platforms until they rose evenly without tilt. He pulled apart the old ventilation system next, clearing years of dust from ducts that once circulated balanced airflow across intake bays. He adjusted the intake fans to restore cross-current movement, air flowing along curved arcs rather than pooling in corners. The concrete floor took longer. Beneath a thin overlay of straight-line paint markings lay the original service channels he'd designed years ago. He chipped away at the surface layer carefully, revealing the curved diagnostic trench beneath. The arcs were still there, buried, but intact. He restored them. Outside, former Vaughn executives drove past occasionally, slowing just long enough to smirk at what they called his junkyard revival. Let him waste his $1,000, one manager reportedly joked at a sales meeting. Inside, Ethan wasn't chasing appearances. He rolled the first of the 12 vehicles onto the lift, a faded sedan with uneven suspension and inconsistent throttle response. The dealership intake tag listed it as unprofitable. He ignored the tag. He measured camber angles, corrected 2-degree misalignment in the rear left assembly, recalibrated the torque map to factory equilibrium, and flushed the transmission fluid that had been topped off but never replaced. He worked methodically. No rush. On day 9, the sedan idled smoothly. On day 10, he listed it quietly on a regional auto exchange site. No marketing campaign. No rebuttal to Vaughn's public insult. Within 48 hours it sold. Above dealership market value. The buyer drove from 2 counties away. This one feels different, the man said after the test drive. It's balanced, Ethan replied. The sale funded the next round of infrastructure repairs. Week 3 focused on suspension and intake recalibration for the second and third vehicles. He restored full torque verification checkpoints rather than sampling. He documented alignment metrics in a small notebook, refining timing intervals between diagnostic stages. Social media commentary still circulated about the 12-car joke, but the tone shifted slightly when buyers began posting independent reviews. Garage cars run cleaner. Less vibration under load. Dealership inventory in the region began moving slower. Ethan didn't comment. He repaired the 4th car. Replaced a misdiagnosed fuel sensor. Adjusted airflow sequencing. The garage no longer looked condemned. It looked intentional. By the end of the first month, 5 of the 12 vehicles were restored and sold. No banners. No announcements. Just steady output. And a number that didn't go unnoticed. The first restored vehicle had sold above dealership market value. Microhook. The first restored vehicle sells above dealership market value. Section 5. 6 months of quiet growth. The growth was not sudden. It was cumulative. By the end of the second month, Ethan's garage no longer looked temporary. The lifts operated smoothly. The restored curved intake lanes allowed vehicles to cycle through diagnostics without bottlenecking. Customers began returning, not because of price, but because of consistency. A contractor who had purchased the first sedan came back with his brother. It held up under load, he said simply. Word traveled without advertising. Fleet managers from small delivery companies began requesting evaluations. Ethan implemented the same torque balancing verification sequence on light trucks and compact utility vehicles. The results were predictable: smoother acceleration curves, reduced fuel inefficiencies caused by misaligned systems, fewer follow-up adjustments. Turnaround time dropped naturally. The curved workflow arcs allowed him to process vehicles faster than Vaughn's streamlined dealership, but without cutting inspection steps. Where the dealership relied on sampling, Ethan ran full verification. He hired 2 mechanics quietly, both former Riverbend technicians who had been laid off during restructuring. He trained them personally, walking them through the geometry beneath each vehicle. "Don't chase speed," he reminded them. "Follow pressure." By month 4, the garage had become a small reconditioning hub. Vehicles once labeled auction risk were restored and resold at premium margins. Buyers began bypassing Vaughn's dealership entirely for certain models. Warranty claims at Vaughn Automotive increased. Dealership spreadsheets reflected the change. Regional managers reported that vehicles processed under the simplified straight-line intake model showed higher post-sale correction rates. The cost of addressing misaligned torque systems eroded profit margins quietly. Amelia Vaughn convened a meeting. "Why are returns up?" she demanded. "Volume is higher," a manager replied. "So are complaints." The data showed the pattern clearly. Vehicles sold through Whitaker Auto were returning at half the rate. By month 5, Ethan noticed something new. Independent wholesalers began calling him directly. "We have inventory that didn't pass Vaughn's intake," one supplier admitted. "Would you consider reviewing it?" He did. Carefully. By month 6, Ethan had sufficient capital to begin purchasing undervalued inventory directly, units flagged by Vaughn's network as marginal. He selected them based on structural viability rather than cosmetic appearance. Each restored vehicle further reinforced his reputation. A dealership executive noticed the trend. "He's buying inventory from under us," one analyst reported. Amelia reviewed the list. Ethan was acquiring vehicles her company had rejected, and selling them profitably. The garage that had once been called a dump now processed more vehicles per square foot than Vaughn's flagship location. Not through scale. Through structure. Customers trusted the results. Mechanics respected the system. Distributors adjusted quietly. The 6-month mark passed without ceremony. Ethan locked the garage each evening and returned home before sunset. He did not track social media mentions. He did not answer press inquiries. He refined the workflow arcs further. He recalibrated timing intervals between torque verification and detailing. He reinvested profits into equipment rather than expansion. Across town, Amelia's dealership reported declining regional share, and Ethan began buying inventory directly out from under her network. Microhook: Ethan begins buying inventory directly out from under her network. Section 6. The numbers shift. The quarterly board meeting began with the usual confidence. Projected growth. Market expansion. Forecast adjustments. Then the regional sales column turned amber. Amelia Vaughn sat at the head of the polished table as the chief financial officer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Midwest regional share is down 6%, he said carefully. "Temporary fluctuation," Amelia replied. The analytics director shifted in his chair. "It's sustained." A news slide appeared. Customer migration patterns. Repeat buyers. Independent distributor shifts. The names surfaced quietly in the bottom corner of the chart. Whitaker Auto. Silence stretched. "That's the garage," one board member said. "Yes." Amelia folded her hands. "Warranty claims?" she asked. "Up 11% compared to last quarter. Correlation?" The analytics director zoomed in on intake workflow metrics. "Vehicles processed under the straight-line intake model show higher post-sale adjustments," he said. "Torque misalignment is a recurring factor." Amelia stared at the chart. "And Whitaker? Defect rate half of ours." The room shifted. "How?" a board member asked. The operations analyst pulled up archived workflow documentation. "I cross-referenced his current layout against our legacy intake system," he said. "The geometry is nearly identical to the original Riverbend design." The next slide appeared. Workflow layout, version 1.3. Designer, Ethan Whitaker. Amelia's jaw tightened slightly. "That was before restructuring," she said. "Yes." "And the arcs?" "Straight and during cost consolidation." The analyst hesitated. His current system appears to have reinstated the curved pressure redistribution lanes. Silence deepened. So he's running our old model? One director asked. Not exactly, the analyst replied. He's refined it. Amelia leaned back slowly. Pull the original cost analysis, she instructed. The numbers populated on the screen. Projected savings from simplification. Short-term margin increase. No long-term defect modeling. And the sign-off? She asked. The approval log appeared. Executive authorization, Amelia Vaughn. The boardroom air shifted noticeably. You signed off on the simplification, a director said quietly. Amelia didn't deny it. It increased quarterly output. And now? Now we're paying for it. She studied the workflow arcs projected on the screen, the same arcs she had once described as inefficient. Across town, Riverbend's trucks continued leaving quietly. Customers were not chasing lower price alone. They were chasing consistency. The analyst spoke again. He's begun acquiring inventory directly from our secondary network. The room stilled. He's what? A director asked. Buying undervalued units before we can recondition them. Amelia closed the tablet slowly. How much leverage does he have? She asked. Enough to influence regional supply, the CFO answered. The pattern was undeniable. The system they had abandoned was outperforming the one they installed. And the man they had mocked now held the geometry that once powered their growth. Amelia remained silent for a long moment. Then she said the only thing that made sense. Schedule a meeting. Microhook. Amelia discovers Ethan designed the original system herself. Section 7. The Quiet Meeting. Amelia did not bring cameras. She parked her sedan in front of Whitaker Auto Repair just before closing time. The faded sign above the door looked exactly as it had months earlier. No new branding. No corporate polish. Inside, the lifts hummed quietly as Ethan lowered a vehicle from inspection. 2 mechanics cleaned their stations and left without ceremony. Amelia stepped forward. You're busy, she said. Not for long, he replied, wiping his hands on a rag. She looked around the garage, the curved intake lane, the inspection trench, the methodical layout. It's efficient, she said. It's balanced. She folded her arms lightly. You've taken a measurable portion of our regional supply. I restored measurable structure. There was no mention of the liquidation event. No reminder of the sarcasm. You're buying inventory directly from our network, she continued. Yes. That affects my leverage. He nodded once. That's not my objective. Then what is? Integrity. She studied him carefully. I can acquire you, she said plainly. Fold this operation into Langford. Offer you executive oversight. Scale this nationally. He shook his head slightly. No. You'd retain control of your system. For how long? As long as performance holds. That's not control, he said evenly. That's conditional tolerance. Silence held between them. What do you want? She asked. Partnership. She raised an eyebrow. You rejected acquisition. I'm rejecting absorption. He walked to the wall and pulled down a copy of the original workflow blueprint. This system works because it redistributes pressure. If you integrate it under quarterly pressure cycles, it will distort again. She listened. I'll share it, he continued. But under conditions. Name them. Independent operational oversight across your facilities. Worker retention guarantees during restructuring. No straight-line simplifications for margin spikes. She considered that carefully. And revenue share? She asked. He shrugged lightly. We'll structure it fairly. You don't want control? I already have it. She looked at the garage floor again. The trucks leaving Riverbend had already shifted the market. He didn't need her network to survive. He had built enough. You're in a position to operate independently, she said. Yes. And you'd rather partner? Yes. Why? Because structure scales better than rivalry. She exhaled slowly. You've changed the market. No, he replied. I restored it. The quiet between them was different now. Measured. Let me take this to the board, she said. You should. As she turned toward the door, she paused. You could have humiliated us. That wouldn't fix the system. She nodded once and stepped outside. Behind her, the garage door rolled halfway down as Ethan returned to tightening a bolt. Microhook, Ethan already owns enough market share to survive without her. Section 8, Public Correction. The press conference was held in front of the very building once labeled inefficient. No banners declared triumph. No fireworks announced a reversal. The only backdrop was the Whitaker Auto Repair sign, faded but intact, and a row of restored vehicles aligned with deliberate symmetry. Amelia Vaughn stepped to the microphone first. 6 months ago, she began, I described this garage as obsolete. The statement was simple, not softened. I was wrong. Reporters leaned forward. The reconditioning workflow that powered Whitaker Auto, and now Riverbend, was originally designed by Ethan Whitaker 14 years ago. She paused as a diagram appeared on a screen beside her, curved intake arcs, torque verification checkpoints, buffer zones. Our restructuring altered that geometry for speed, she continued. It improved quarterly output. It undermined long-term stability. The crowd was quiet. We are implementing a full operational realignment across Langford facilities based on the original workflow architecture Ethan developed. She stepped slightly aside. Whitaker Auto and Riverbend will remain independently owned and operated. This is not an acquisition. It is a partnership. A reporter raised a hand. Why not buy him out? Because integrity isn't something you absorb, Amelia replied. It's something you respect. Murmurs rippled through the gathered press. She turned toward Ethan. He corrected what we distorted. Ethan approached the podium without flourish. He did not adjust the microphone. He did not look at the crowd for affirmation. The system works, he said evenly, because it distributes pressure instead of concentrating it. He pointed lightly toward the diagram. When you straighten curves for speed, stress builds where you can't see it. When you restore them, performance stabilizes. There was no reference to the public mockery. No reminder of the liquidation event. Are you satisfied? A journalist asked. Ethan paused. I'm consistent. The answer was not dramatic. It was precise. Amelia nodded once. Our restructuring initiative includes independent engineering oversight, worker protections, and long-term fatigue modeling requirements, she added. We're not chasing short-term spikes anymore. The applause that followed was restrained. Measured. When the conference ended, executives approached Ethan with proposals. He declined most of them quietly. Riverbend and his garage were enough. His revenge had not been spectacle. It had been sustainable success. He had not humiliated Amelia. He had corrected the geometry. And in doing so, he restored something more valuable than reputation. He restored balance. The trucks leaving Riverbend that afternoon carried components built under curved arcs and verified torque systems. The garage sign remained unchanged. Whitaker Auto Repair did not expand its name. It expanded its influence. And it did so without noise. Precision had outlasted arrogance. Structure had outperformed spectacle. And sustainable success had replaced short-term dominance. Section 9, The Sign Stays. The city replaced the pavement on Mercer Avenue 2 months later. New streetlights went up. A coffee shop opened on the corner. The neighborhood looked subtly different, cleaner, steadier. But Whitaker Auto Repair remained exactly where it had always stood. The sign above the garage door was still faded, its paint chipped from years of weather. Amelia had offered to replace it with something modern, branded, polished. Ethan declined. It works, he said. Inside, the shop no longer felt small. Riverbend's expansion allowed overflow intake to route through the garage's curved diagnostic trench before entering full-scale reconditioning. Apprentices from the local technical college rotated through on Saturdays, learning how to read torque curves instead of memorizing shortcuts. Former Riverbend technicians who had once packed their belongings into cardboard boxes now trained new hires. The curved arcs on the factory floor were mirrored in the shop's smaller layout, pressure redistributed, not forced. The once condemned garage had become a regional reference point. Fleet managers visited quietly. Independent dealerships requested workflow consultations. Trade journals referenced the Whitaker model and articles about sustainable reconditioning. Ethan did not attend awards ceremonies. He arrived at 5:30 a.m., as he always had, unlocking the garage door before the street fully woke. He walked the floor, checking alignment on the lift. He recalibrated a torque wrench by a fraction. He listened for the faint shift in sound when a vehicle idled under load. He did not delegate the fundamentals. "Consistency isn't glamorous," he told an apprentice once. "It's structural." The apprentice nodded. Across town, Langford facilities implemented the curved intake arcs fully. Warranty claims stabilized. Margins leveled. Worker turnover declined. Amelia visited once without media. "You kept the sign," she observed. "Yes. You could have renamed it." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. "Why?" She studied the faded letters. "You've built something larger than this building." He looked around the shop. "No," he said quietly. "I just fixed it." Outside, a customer picked up one of the restored vehicles. No flashy ribbon, no celebratory photo. Just keys exchanged and a quiet nod. The garage did not expand into a franchise. It expanded into trust. The sign stayed. The curved arc stayed. The workers stayed. Ethan closed the shop at sunset and walked home without checking headlines. The once condemned garage had become respected not because it changed its appearance, but because it returned to structure. And structure, once restored, did not need a new name. Section 10. The drawer beneath the counter. Ethan locked the garage just before sunset. The new pavement still felt unfamiliar under his boots, but the old sign above the door remained unchanged. Whitaker Auto Repair. The paint chipped. The letters steady. At home, the kitchen light hummed softly. Claire sat at the table with colored pencils scattered around her plate. The stuffed rabbit leaned against a glass of milk like it always did. "You're early," she said. "Looks like it." She held up the drawing. It was the garage, lights glowing through the windows, cars lying neatly outside in perfect rows. Above the roof she had drawn small yellow stars. "They're all straight now," she said proudly. Ethan studied the curved driveway she had sketched. "Good alignment," he said. She grinned. He opened the drawer beneath the counter. Inside lay the original workflow blueprints, folded along old creases. The curved intake arcs were still precise, still balanced. He placed Claire's drawing carefully on top of them, aligning the edges without thinking. Paper over paper. Past and present layered quietly. He closed the drawer. Outside, Riverbend's lights glowed across the lot. The conveyors moved in steady rhythm. The trucks departed without ceremony. No banners hung from the garage. No speeches echoed in the kitchen. No grand celebration marked the shift. Just quiet dignity restored. And a system running exactly as it was meant to.